Hello, I'm Jeffrey Sachs, Director of the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network, and I'm absolutely delighted to be part of this course on long-term, low greenhouse gas emission development strategies. What should countries do to help shape their economies, and especially their energy systems, to become climate safe and to achieve overall sustainable development? This is the challenge that was set out when the world agreed on the Sustainable Development Goals in September 2015, and then a few weeks later on the Paris Climate Agreement in December 2015. These agreements are so urgent that governments have scrambled to start putting them into effect. And indeed, for the Paris Climate Agreement, which required ratification by a substantial number of countries in the world, it took less than 1 year to put that global agreement into operation. And that is a sign of the fact that overall, worldwide, governments in every part of the world understand that it is urgent that we change direction of the world economy so that it is climate safe, so that it is fair, and so that it promotes economic development in today's poor countries. In other words, that we achieve climate safety in the context of sustainable development. In this module, I'm going to talk about how we should think about implementing the Paris Climate Agreement. In other words, what are the basic strategies? What are the basic parameters? What was agreed in Paris in the climate agreement? What do the Sustainable Development Goals have to say about the challenges and the modalities, the pathways to achieve climate safety through a transformed energy and land use system? So in the first chapter of this module on achieving the Paris Climate Agreement, I want to talk about the basic challenge that we face, which is setting and achieving global goals. Because even this basic idea that the world's governments, the 193 member states of the United Nations, should adopt clear goals and then work on clear timelines to achieve them is unusual. Most of the time we think about countries as sovereign. They decide for themselves what they're going to do. Many countries don't even state very clear goals. And here we are in two cases, the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Climate Agreement, with explicit, universally agreed objectives and clear timelines associated with those objectives. And every government of the world responsible for pursuing those objectives that were set. So let's understand first, why did the world agree on these goals? Here you see before you the 17 Sustainable Development Goals adopted on September 25th, 2015. Why 17? Why these 17? Well, for quite a while now, for at least a generation, the world has been trying to come to grips with the challenge of sustainable development. As the United Nations member states define sustainable development, that means having a holistic vision of society that aims to achieve three very broad kinds of objectives. One kind of objective is economic well-being, prosperity and ending poverty. A second kind of objective is what in the UN we call social inclusion, which means everybody gets to be part of this prosperity. And the third objective, broadly defined, is environmental sustainability. One could say that the concept of sustainable development therefore means a triple bottom line: economic, social, and environmental objectives, all achieved in a holistic or an integrated manner. Now, why these 17 goals? Because when the 193 United Nations member states decided in 2012 we need to put sustainable development into operation, they negotiated for 3 years what are the priorities on the economic, social, and environmental front. They started with a list of around 300 potential goals that were first enumerated on the list, and then they thought about how to organize that broad list and to define in a coherent and in a smaller number of goals this triple bottom line. And they ended up 3 years later, actually with the gavel falling in August 2015, just a month before the formal adoption of these goals, with 17. And you all should know those 17 by now, because that is part of our need for everybody on the planet. These are our goals. They are to last. They are to frame global cooperation to the year 2030. So I count on you knowing them, so I don't have to enumerate them one by one. But broadly speaking, most of the first 9 goals are about the economic dimension. They're about ending poverty. They're about ensuring access to basic needs like health and education, water, and modern energy services. Then goals 5, 10, and 16 are especially about social inclusion, because SDG number 5 is about women's equality, gender equality. Goal number 10 is about reducing inequality within our societies and across countries. And goal number 16 is about peaceful and inclusive societies so that we don't have discrimination or violence against women and girls, or against minority groups, or against highly vulnerable populations like migrants. Then goals 11 through 15 are primarily the environmental objectives, that our cities should be sustainable, that our consumption and production patterns should be sustainable, that we fight climate change, SDG 13, keep that in mind, and that we preserve biodiversity both in the oceans, that's SDG 14, and on land, SDG 15. And then finally, SDG 17 says we're going to do all of those objectives, economic, social, and environmental, in partnership. Now, remember SDG 13, it says control climate change. That's the global warming that we humans are causing on the planet. And there was an asterisk put onto the SDGs, literally on the page. When you look up the UN SDGs, you'll find the asterisk near SDG 13, because it says that to control human-induced climate change, we are guided by the decisions of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, or the UNFCCC. That's what was meeting in Paris at what was called COP21, or the Conference of the Parties, 21st meeting since the first one in Berlin back in 1995, to settle finally on a way forward to control human-made global warming and other climate change. Now, why was this needed? Well, here is another important graphic. It's become almost iconic among sustainable development practitioners. There's the Earth, and it is divided up into risk areas, which we call planetary boundaries. It says that humanity, by being 7.4 billion of us right now, by having a world economy so productive, so energy using, so resource using, we're actually damaging the planet in fundamental ways. Cutting down rainforests, global warming, of course, by putting greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, acidifying the oceans because of all of the carbon dioxide that is emitted when we burn fossil fuels, destroying the habitat of species, emitting massive amounts of pollutants into the water, into the land, and into the air, depleting our fresh water supplies. All of these are kind of trespassing on the boundaries of a safe planet. And so that's what brought the world's governments to Paris just a few weeks after they had agreed on the Sustainable Development Goals, in order to focus on one of those overwhelmingly risky planetary boundaries, and that is the boundary of climate itself.